Welcome to Where Her Heart Speaks, a show designed to challenge and disrupt ineffective thoughts and behaviors to help you not only embody peace, joy, calm, and certainty, but also to help you live the life you've always dreamed of living. Where Her Heart Speaks with Coach Catherine begins now.
Hi there, it's Coach Catherine. Have you ever wondered about the state of your nervous system? Do your thoughts, behaviors, and actions come from your authentic self, or are they really trauma responses? Hey, we've all heard about the fight or flight response, but what does that really mean? Listen, I've created a quick and easy assessment for you to determine the state of your nervous system. You get to answer questions like, is it keeping you safe? Is it keeping you stuck? Or is it allowing you to be your authentic self and thrive? If you'd like to know the answer to that question, as well as how you can experience more peace and calm in your life, I want to invite you to go to my website at www.catherinejames.com, where you will find the assessment right there on the front page. Welcome and welcome back. I'm Catherine James, your international speaker, best-selling author, trauma-informed coach, and your host for this show, Where Her Heart Speaks. What do you do when your history meets your present? That's what we'll be talking about this week. While attending my nephew's high school graduation last week, the speaker, whose name I did not catch, asked a question. This question interrupted my thoughts. That question, what I just asked you. What do you do when your history meets your present? Now, before I go on, I just want to ask, invite, prompt you to share the link to this episode. If you know someone who may be struggling with things that has happened in their history and it seems like they just can't move on, they just can't move forward, go ahead and invite them to join in and listen to this episode alongside you. Now, when this gentleman asked that question, other than his story about his earlier years in life, I didn't hear much more of what he said. My mind kept replaying that question. I began to think about my history. I began to think about the definition of history. And then I started asking additional questions. Questions like, does it really matter whether or not I know my history? Where does one's history really begin? Does it start in the span of his or her life? Does it go back even further? Is there anything really to do or not to do? Or can someone really do anything about their history or about when their history meets their present? I was intrigued. I was intrigued by the question. And as I thought about a topic for this week's episode, that question came back up. But this time it showed up with answers. It showed up with answers to the question. They were present. And it was answers such as our history dictates how we think. Answers such as our history dictates how we believe, how we behave, how we view and treat others, as well as how we view and treat ourselves. It showed up with answers like, our history is filled with experiences, personal experiences, and ancestral experiences. It said our history surpasses our lifespan. And as a result of that, our history shapes our present being. Yeah, a lot to think about. And let me tell you, I have been thinking. And I just ask you to ponder a few questions of your own. What was shaped in your DNA? What was shaped in your nervous system? What shaped your brain, like the development of your brain? What shaped your beliefs? In answering those questions, I'd also invite you to think about the generations that came before you. Think about the social, economical, and political climate in which each generation lived. Think about all of the factors that shaped those bodies. Listen, as an African American woman in the United States who was born here in the United States, I'd like to believe that my shaping predates American chattel slavery. I'd like to believe that. And truly, there's kind of this knowing, because there is a part of me that only knows how to keep going. Like, I can bob and weave and I can get knocked down, and I have been knocked down really hard. But that keep going is felt in my being. And based on my ancestral history, what I know is that there was a people that I have come from, which is why I'm here. They didn't stop. There was something about them that caused them to keep going. And I know that that is a part of me. Also, as an African American woman, I know I was shaped by American chattel slavery, generationally and personally. Like it didn't just shape my ancestors based on what they experienced, but it also shaped me based on what I experienced in my early life and what I experienced as an adult. Before I started studying and understanding the effects of trauma, I often wondered things like why Blacks or African Americans would beat their children. Like, I often wondered why they belittled and talked down to their children. And I wondered if it was the lasting stain of slavery. After reading several books and coming to understand why they did what they did during slavery, and in particular, Joy DeGruy post-traumatic slave syndrome, I am certain that it is. I'm certain that it was. So as I thought about the social, economical, and political climate of each generation, I could better understand my shaping. I could better understand my mother's shaping. I could better understand my father's shaping as well as their parents' shaping. So while you ponder and you think about the answers to those questions, I'd offer that you notice what's happening. What's happening in your body at this moment? I realize that many of the conversations I go into can cause sensations in the body that may not feel comfortable. And I'm often careful to address those as opposed to leaving people in a space of discomfort. So I'd offer that you notice in this moment what's happening in your body. What sensations are you feeling? What emotions are you experiencing, if any? And just notice them. Notice them and say to yourself that it's fine. I'm currently enrolled in a somatic course, and one of the instructors, Alta Star, took us through a centering exercise such as this and suggested the words, "That's what's here." So I also offer them to you. With your noticing, simply acknowledge what is present, not making it mean anything, just acknowledging that's what is here. Your history is always meeting your present. It can't not. It's impossible to not meet your present. It's just not possible. Your history is who you are. Your history began before you. Mark Wolin, in his book, It Didn't Start With You, notes that according to studies, a woman's egg and a man's sperm can be stamped or marked or etched by events that they experience with the potential to affect subsequent generations. Alta Star calls this a generational inheritance. We're familiar with the medical forms and physicians that ask about your family's history when evaluating you or assessing the likelihood. Yeah, physicians ask about our family's history when evaluating you or assessing the likelihood of physical ailments like high blood pressure, cancer, or diabetes. They were onto something. They somehow knew that there was something important in one's history. So we have to ask, why do they seek this information? Again, they knew that there was something important about one's history that could potentially meet their present. So now, although science is telling us that while those conditions can in fact be inherited by subsequent generations, it is not the condition, but the cause of the condition that has been passed down. Did you catch that? The cause of the condition. And what's the cause? You've guessed it. Trauma. Now, I'm going to say that's a different topic for a different episode. But I want to return you to the initial set of questions that plagued me. Does it matter whether or not I know my history? And I have 2 words for you. It matters. Listen, it is so important to understand the history of you. Your history shaped who you are today. Your history shaped how you show up today. Understanding your history, in my experience, makes it easier to accept yourself. It makes it easier to release feelings of guilt and shame, and it makes it easier to have compassion for both others and yourself. Now, you may be wondering, how do I know if my history is meeting my present? How do you know that? And I will just offer you a few questions to pause and ask yourself. And we're going to start by looking at your family, because there's so much, just as those physicians knew, just as the doctors know, there's so much to be pulled out of our family history, out of the familial connection. So as you look at your family, you want to ask, are there commonalities amongst all family members? Commonalities in their thought, their beliefs, their behaviors, and even medical conditions. some that have been diagnosed, some that have not been diagnosed. Then you want to ask yourself, have you identified those commonalities and are resistant? Like you're doing everything in your power to be different. Another question you can ask yourself is, do you have unexplainable fears that prevent you from doing things or living the life that you desire? Another interesting fact shared by Mark Wolin was basically there are 3 generations living inside of one body when a woman is 5 months pregnant. Like this blew my mind. And to make it clear, I'm going to quote him directly. And in his book, he says, when your grandmother was 5 months pregnant with your mother, the precursor cell of the egg you developed from was already present in your mother's ovaries. 3 generations sharing the same biological environment. And he went on to say, in terms of men, the precursor cells of the sperm you developed from were present in your father when he was a fetus in your mother's womb. And I end quote. It is highly possible that your unexplainable fear did not originate with you. It could have been one of your parents. It could have belonged to one of your grandparents. And I've experienced this. I remember working with a young man on fear. He had this fear and he didn't know why he had this fear. He didn't know where it came from, but he had this fear and it was keeping him from advancing in his career. It was keeping him from advancing in life. He just didn't know where it came from and why it kept tripping him up. And I, as a result of some training, but I felt like it may not have been his. And I chose to use a modality that I'm certified in called REST that actually tracks the origin of an emotion. And we found out that this fear he carried actually belonged to his great-great-grandfather. Now, you might be wondering, how would somebody figure that out? And again, it's the modality or method that is designed to track that information. But what was beautiful, because he was a little, he questioned it. He was a little apprehensive and not sure if he wanted to believe that, but he had the opportunity to go back and speak to some people who could verify this information. And he was actually able to verify and confirm it to be true by those people who were still living. So it's very possible that that fear or whatever it is that you're carrying that you can't explain may not be yours. So common thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, and even conditions in your family, being resistant or trying to be different, like you don't want to be like them or that person, trying to be different, running away from, or having a fear and not knowing where it came from. Those are all signs, not all, but those are some signs, all signs in that all I'm giving you in this moment, but not all as in finite, but those are signs that your history is meeting your present. Now, someone else may be listening and you're sitting there and you're actually on the other end of the bench. You're not wondering whether your history is meeting your present because you already know that it is. You've identified generational curses. You see them throughout your family. You've identified generational blessings and more. I like to also refer to these as generational traumas. Again, as Alta Star said, generational inheritance. You may be the person that has identified these things. I'm going to say to the person who's wondering, the person who has identified, to me, for all of us, there are some aspects of our history that we love. Like for me, I love that it is in my DNA to be resourceful. I love that it is in my DNA to find a way to just keep going. And then there are other aspects that we know are not serving us, that are keeping us stuck, that are keeping us from living the life that we desire to live. There are beliefs that no longer serve you. There are behaviors that no longer serve you. There are fears that no longer serve you. And it's time to let them go. So here we've got to take the good. Take the good of our history and choose differently about those things that no longer serve us. And this is where it gets a little tricky. Choosing differently is so much easier said than done. It's just not that simple. It's not as simple as saying, I'm going to choose to think differently, or I'm choosing to behave differently, or I'm not going to be afraid of that anymore. It's just not that simple because these are not cognitive issues. And oftentimes when we're in thought, we're using our cognitive brain, but it is not our cognitive brain where these things are stored. They are stored in our physiological brain, if you will, or in our bodies, in our nervous system. And I like to say that we can't think our way out of a body problem. We can't think our way out of a body problem. Your history is mostly stored in your body. Your history is mostly stored in your body or in your nervous system. And yes, it shows up in your brain. It shows up in your brain and it creates your stories and behaviors. But it doesn't originate there. It only shows up there. 90% of the time, 80% of the time, it doesn't originate there. So the only way to resolve a body issue is through the body. A reshaping has to take place. The nervous system has to be regulated. And in my experience, this is the only thing that produces lasting results. In my experience, after working with hundreds of women, this is the only thing that produces lasting results. Now, if this message has resonated with you, if you know there are aspects of your history that is meeting your present that do not support who you desire to be or what you want in your life, I'd invite you to book a free 30-minute clarity call with me by going to www.calendly.com/Coach Catherine, CATHRINE. Go to www.calendly.com/Coach Catherine right now. Do that today. Do that today. So, in closing, my prayer for you is that you will come to know your history. Identify the good of it. Identify the part that is keeping you stuck. And take the necessary action to regulate your nervous system so that you can live the life you not only desire, but the life you deserve. And over the course of the rest of your week And until our paths cross again, please remember that in this life, you get to choose. So choose to listen to your heart and choose to live a sensational life. Peace and blessings.
Thank you for listening to Where Her Heart Speaks with Coach Catherine, where Catherine aims to challenge and disrupt ineffective thoughts and behaviors to help you not only embody peace, joy, calm, and certainty, but also help you live the life you've always dreamed of living. Follow Catherine on Facebook and Instagram at I Am Catherine James and visit www.catherinejames.com. Remember, to live the life of your dreams, you must go within and return to the place where your heart speaks.